and Adele Bovard is our new Deputy Superintendent of Administration, most recently from Superintendent of Webster Schools. And so this is a shared presentation by our RCSD leadership team. I'm Katerina Leone-Menino. I'm the Executive Director for School Innovation. And our outside educational experts, Dan Loengard, retired Superintendent of both Syracuse City School District and Utica, Ellen O'Donnell, retired BOCES Superintendent, Mike Melamed, retired Assistant Superintendent of Instruction for Binghamton City Schools, and Mike Melamed, who's had a variety of roles as Assistant Superintendent in both Syracuse, Utica, and then high school principal.
Well, we got a lot of superintendents that are used to dealing with boards, so that's good.
We hope tonight to offer you an opportunity to get a global picture of our DTSDE process. Ms. Turner, if you could advance the slide. So just quickly to give everybody a brief context around the policy and history of the diagnostic tool, the DTSDE. This is a tool that includes 6 tenets. It is outlined in New York State Commissioner's Regulation 100.18, and this is a regulation that focuses on the importance of having common expectations for what strategic school improvement looks like. It is a process of continuous improvement, one that outlines a rubric, which you have the detailed rubric included in your folder for you, and includes a review process both by district team, school team, and outside educational experts, and sometimes state education teams. And so each visit is about 2 to 3 days and requires on-site review that includes sometimes, as I said, New York State reps, content specialists, OEEs here today, and then regional supports like our Bilingual Education Resource Network, Special Ed Technical Assistance Support Center, and School Improvement Specialist. We are also attempting to build capacity among principals to be able to review each other's schools, and our deputy superintendents will speak a little bit more to that later on in the presentation. A typical visit, and we've conducted over 3,000 classroom observations to date as part of this process. A typical visit includes classroom observations as the heart, but also interviews with different stakeholder groups, including school leadership, vertical grade level teams, horizontal grade level teams, student support teams, students and parents and community, a document review of artifacts, and then a data dive into the school achievement data. And then there is a report, and after the review is conducted, a debriefing is done in person by the lead reviewer, oftentimes an outside educational expert or New York State education representative, and includes the school chief and principal and key members of the school improvement team. A written report follows, typically within 2 to 3 weeks of completion, the ones that we conduct in-house, with findings and specific recommendations. And what you'll see tonight is a summary of the data at the district level as a global view. And so, as I mentioned, the diagnostic tool includes 6 key components, also referred to as tenets. Underneath each tenet is a statement of practice. And so, tenet 1 is really focused on, on school district leadership, the district elements and leadership capacity. Here in the district, our last review was conducted in March of 2014, and we have a draft finding. This rubric, as you'll see in the statements of practice, as we'll get to later, focuses on tenets 2 to 6 and statements of practice 0.2 through 0.5. And that's because it's designed so that it's integrated with district and school being combined. Tenet 2 is a specific focus on school leader practices and decisions at the school level, including vision, the execution of the vision, the decision-making, resource allocation, support for APPR, and the use of data to drive decision-making and improvement goals, specifically as related to the SCEP, which is the new part of the process. So the review feeds the SCEP. And then curriculum development, tenet 3. Tenet 3 is about the written curriculum, the planned curriculum. And that leads to tenet 4, which is more focused on the instructional teacher practices in classrooms and how that curriculum is enacted and how it reflects the student needs in the classroom. Tenets 5 go into social-emotional development and health, and the idea that we must build systems and supports to support students' academic performance that go well beyond what's typically in instructional standards. And Tenet 6, which is a focus on family and community engagement, the structures and supports within a school to support the engagement and the voice of various stakeholder groups. And so, as I mentioned, the shift here is that we have done reviews in the past that have been focused specifically on just compliance. And this is a shift to one of continuous improvement, in a continuous improvement cycle. A review is conducted, that's an assessment. Plans are developed to address those recommendations, that's the SCEP. Within the SCEP is goal setting and action planning. And then the function of the school-based planning team is to help monitor and evaluate the implementation of that plan and adjust as necessary and repeating that process continuously. And this is a big shift for us as a district that has traditionally conducted reviews and written plans as a matter of mandate and compliance versus one of continuous improvement and iterations of revision. And so, as I mentioned, our outside educational experts, their role is to chair, organize, and conduct district-led reviews. They prepare debriefing reports and author final school reports after a school visit. This particular team of OEEs has delivered this service to RCSD over the past 2 years. They were some of the first outside educational experts certified by the staff. Each have to go through a rigorous training process, application process, and approval process through state education. Overall, they have reviewed over 49 schools and visited over 3,000 classrooms in the course of 2 years, and these final reports are then brought through a district-level calibration team within 1 to 1.5 weeks after the last day of the visit. And so I briefly mentioned who are our OEEs. This offers you a little bit more information about their particular expertise and what they bring to the table with us here in the district. And with that, I'll turn it over, and Bill Scott will talk a little bit about the scope and history of the reviews for the past few years and the vision for moving forward.
Okay, if we go to the next slide.
And board members, you have a full-size version of this in your folder.
As big as it gets. This really shows us the kind of school visits that you can conduct. The self-led review would be where the district itself does a review without, let me start with the state. The state review, the state decides who they're going to review. If they see that there's a school that's struggling because of the data or any other kinds of reporting, the state will actually come in and say, we're going to do this review. Then for all other schools, there's a district-led review, but with an OEE. That's what we are. I hate the word OEE, outside educational expert. I'd rather have it be outside educational practitioner, because those people that are on our team have worked in urban schools, rural schools, whatever, so that we have a perspective that's sympathetic but can give an honest look. So those reviews take place with an OEE, but the school district can do a review with just their staff. Now, a word about the staff. We work with about 20 to 25 of the people that are already Rochester people, and I have to say the excellence and the camaraderie and the way that we saw things and talked things through was wonderful. Now, the advantage of having an outside person versus just the school review is that, you know, when you're in the thing, you don't see everything. You know, you've done it. It's sort of like when you write a paper and you can't edit it yourself because you've done it so many times, you think you said what you said, but you didn't. So you give it to a friend, and the friend goes over it and goes, oh, you missed this. That's an important part. So a building principal and their team can get together and look at our report, look at the recommendations and say, and if they ring true, which most people tell us they do, now they know where they can start, where they can fix. Testing itself isn't useful. You know that the test that we put our kids through, if you don't know what they're not doing right or what they are doing right, the tests are useless. Okay, so I think that covers it. If you have any questions in the end, we can do it, but I know that I will get buzzed out if I go much over another minute.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. I spent my whole career fighting with the state, I'll confess, but the one good thing that they have done is this comprehensive school rubric. So when you get a chance, they've made a lot of mistakes with APPR and this testing and all that, but if you get a chance to look at the rubric actually describes in great detail what an effective school would look like. So it is helpful to the schools. The other theme is, even though we're going to talk generally, if you can go to the next slide, the one after that, generally about the district, the diagnostic tool is intended to be an individual diagnosis of individual schools. So in our report tonight, when I'm going to give some general pieces, it's really not what the design was. But as you can see from there, the way it came out was about 30% fell into the range of highly effective and effective, and 70% fell in the ineffective and developing range. Now remember, all the schools basically in Buffalo, Syracuse, Rochester, New York City were in this because of the performance issues. So it's not a surprise that our system, as we implement it, would end up with 30% in the effective, highly effective, and 70% ineffective or developing. Now to go down further, we looked at each of the tenets, and if you go to the next one, and again, you have this, and generally, here's what we found out, that the weakest areas were in tenet 3 and tenet 4, in the curriculum area and the teaching area. It was a little bit higher in the building principalship. Before we go out and make generalizations about groups of people in the system, you already know that in terms of budget and in terms of people, the highest impact is with our teaching staff. It falls into the 70% range. And this is not because, in our estimation, people don't care, don't want to do it, or any of that, but it's because of the way we have both trained people, and it's because of the way we have said what is acceptable practice. In each of our schools, we find a couple of teachers that are teaching off the chart. So this is not new, but this isn't new practices that we have to do. What we have to do is end the isolation, which is systemic in all districts all over, but in the urban districts it hurts our children the worst because they cannot be in classrooms. We found, not only the 4 of us, but the 20 of us, that actually the kids' behavior was quite good or compliant. Now I'm not saying in the cafeteria or outside or in the hallway, but in the classrooms, we were in 3,000 of them, kids come wanting to learn, wanting to listen, but again, the classes are very short. Kids are sitting in rows, people are talking sort of at them and they're not engaged. But we didn't see discipline in the classroom as the major driving issue. We would say that the impact of improving instruction and ending the isolation in the classroom is where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck. The next piece is done by Mike and Ellen, and that talks about where we go next. Again, you have all of these by school. It's really intended to drive the change in the SCEP plans more than looking at it as a whole, because what's good for one school may not be good for the other school. And then the next chart, yeah, if you look, the next one, the triangle, one more. Okay, we're reporting tonight on one piece of this, the SCEP plans and the DTSDE, the diagnostic process. The key to this is this triangle, that as we review every school going forward, a discussion has to be held about student achievement. Where are kids scoring? We can't get away from it. I can tell you where the mistakes are on testing and all of this, but at the end of the day, it's about student achievement. And then it's about the APPR and how that links up.
Reiterate in terms of a planning cycle and how this all comes to pass and how it starts and where we're going in the future. Basically, SED is determining which districts and schools are making this list, and they're designating them either as priority schools that must receive those reviews conducted by the state. If they are labeled as focus schools, they are receiving a district-led review conducted by a person such as us. Some schools have not yet had any, but they're conducting their own self-assessment, which is reviewed by the teams. So the lowest 5% performance are priority, the lowest 10% are focus, and both categories are required to conduct these reviews. Next slide. Key to this is making sure that once we get to the end of the visit, Katerina has urged the OEEs to make some level of recommendations to the schools right away, so they can get on it and begin to assess what we believe are the deficit areas in the school. They have, once the final report is generated and given to them, they have what they then need to set goals and to address deficiencies noted in the report, and we give specific recommendations for all of the items that are labeled either developing or ineffective.
We're tag teaming, so I have a couple of slides. Katerina talked about continuous improvement, and the next slide shows you how the SCEP and the DTSDE reviews fit in. So if we look at the top, we begin with that DTSDE diagnostic tool for school and district effectiveness review of the school. Out of that review, as Ellen said, recommendations must be included in the school final report written by the OEs for any statement of practice that receives a developing or an ineffective score. So that suggests a lot of recommendations, since Dan talked about 70% of your scores being in D or I. Following the written report and the recommendations, those go to the school, and the turnaround has been relatively quick for planning. And planning specifically includes the development of the SCEP. And we're going to look at a page in the SCEP, the School Comprehensive Education Plan, in just a moment. From the SCEP comes activities, specific activities that are implemented in the classroom and in the school, and for the district review in the district. There is progress monitoring, consistent monitoring of how those goals and activities are being addressed. And then that leads to another DTSDE review, one every year, and the cycle continues. What the state has done is they've aligned the DTSDE format to the SCEP format. So you start with an identification of which SOP is being discussed. This sheet includes the rating, whether it's an H, highly effective, effective, developing, or and so on. The recommendation from the report is included on your SCEP page. Then the team writing the SCEP develops a goal to address that recommendation, and following that, there can be more than one goal per statement of practice and more than one activity under each goal. The goals should be written as SMART goals, which means they have to be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. And so they should be written in that form, as should be the activities. So that's how the work that we do ties into the work that the schools do in writing their SCEP plans.
As Katerina mentioned, in the past these reviews might have gone on a shelf and collected dust. So why is this more relevant today? The superintendent has made it very clear to the district that the SCEPs and the DTSDE process are to be taken seriously. They are to form the work of the school and be used to drive the improvement process. So this board and this committee, it's a, an exercise in educating yourself as to what those approximately 60 items are that the schools are being held responsible for, and to see how they are progressing, because if they have a lot on their plate, they may only be able to address so many of them in a given year. What are their priorities? And why else is this improvement not an option? SED in the past has created this graduated series of consequences for schools if they continue too long in this priority or focus status. So the goal is to get the achievement scores up through these activities and through these goal-setting processes to eventually rotate these schools off the list, and that is the goal. Next slide, and come to evidence. We have to come up with evidence to support why we're scoring a particular item the way we are, and so we kind of work that out in terms of how we feel the evidence supports whether the school is falling into whatever category we're rating it as. There's a lot of averaging that goes on. So I, as an individual, can feel fairly confident that most of these scores are fairly accurate given the parameters of the way they've set the scoring instrument up.
So back to the SCEP. As you've heard before, the SCEP, schools are mandated. Oh, I'm sorry, the next slide. I'm sorry, I apologize, back one. Okay. So as I described to you before, SCEP mandates that schools address developing and ineffective ratings. SCEP is also used, a critical piece is the fiscal piece, where it's used to justify expenditures out of title funds and other funding sources, and may lead into the APPR process. The next slide, please. There are three elements in the SCEP process: the recommendations from the DTSDE, from the school final report, goals, one or more goals linked to the recommendations, and one or more activities for each of these goals. So there's a direct link clearly between the reports that we write and the SCEP that the schools generate. Not part of the state protocol, but a suggestion from Katerina is that when we do our debriefing, we also leave the school with several key recommendations other than those that are in the report, so they can immediately start to act on those recommendations.
And now Adele and Christiane.
Thank you. Good evening, President, Vice President, and Commissioners. I'm excited to be here tonight as the new Deputy Superintendent for Teaching and Learning. As we move forward in our plan, and as we look at our plan, it is unacceptable to us, and I know that it is unacceptable to the community and to the students that we serve. Our work is to move forward to do better and to be better in our process, in the systems, and what we do in the school. As we move forward this year, we are going to build capacity among teachers as leaders, so they take ownership of learning in their building. Students also as leaders, so they are taking ownership of learning in their classroom. And also of our principals and central office. We want to build capacity and make people feel and believe that we can achieve and that they can help make this shift where student learning is a priority. We are going to collaborate, cohesive and comprehensive in each school, that we have programs implementation in each school and that we're monitoring it. Not only are we monitoring it, if there are problems, we are there to support. That will be our stance as we move forward. Because we all know that our student outcomes must be better than what it is. And we want to make sure that we move that expectation up from the top to the bottom. All of us know that the classroom is where the difference are going to be made. You've heard the report. Our students come to school to learn. Now it is up to us to make sure that that learning is taking place.
We're in a people business, and I think our most important valuable resource are the people that work for kids in the school. So we have teacher expertise, we have administrative expertise, we have board member input, we have community input, and we come together as a community behind our school, and we want to be the people that create the systems and support what's in place so that we can marshal the expertise that we have within the school system. We've had the input from our external educators, and now moving forward, we really have to build on the strength of our internal resources and marshal people's strength. We have to marshal time. So I think there's recommendations with school scheduling to maximize instructional time for students. The district, that's one of your focus areas. You've been doing quite a bit of work in that area, and we'll bring our lens to that as well and really work with individual buildings, individual teachers to maximize instructional time. And the third resource is dollars. There are dollars that come from the state funds to support these initiatives. We want to make sure those dollars are used wisely and efficiently in support of the goals of the plan. And I think the most important thing is that, as Dr. Atua was mentioning, really get that sense of collaboration in the district. When you work in silos, when teachers work in isolation, like our experts mentioned, you're not doing your best work for students. So we are highly collaborative. We do believe that we're smarter and stronger together, that we need to work in strong and dynamic teams to have the highest impact on student learning. So the implementation really is by doing. I'm new, so I think, what is this, day 7 or 8 that we're here? And so we don't know if you've heard this story yet, but when plans have been made in the past, many times they're made in what we call the autopsy. So the year is over, you're looking at results, but there's nothing you can do about it because the year is done. So it's sort of like the patient, okay? The patient's already dead and now you're looking at what went wrong, right? So we want to shift from the autopsy to the practitioner's doctor's visit. So you're in the doctor's office, you're not feeling well, but you're saying, what can I do differently? And you're doing things differently. You're talking with the patient, you're working on new plans, you're trying new things. And it's as we've been hearing today, it's ongoing and recursive, so it doesn't stop, it never ends. You're using formative practices rather than summative practices, and you're continually setting a system in place for a two-way conversation between buildings, central office, between teachers, building administration, and everyone's talking about what can be done for students. Students become the heart of the conversation. So that is what collaboration means to us, and we are leaders that will do by leading by example. We want to be talking about what we're doing rather than what we're planning going forward.
And what strategies can move our practice forward? What is it that we need to do? We need to discuss that, collaborate with the schools, and come up with plans. Like my counter.
School. Now the problem is APPR is very competitive and it makes it hard to do it, but it still has to be done. So that's one. Two is professional development has always been done. I was in charge of it, in Syracuse, I know. We told people what to do. We didn't show them what to do, we told them what to do. So that we have to show people, which takes a longer model, and give them feedback. And it's, if any of you are golfers, you know, telling somebody how to golf and showing them and practice and all that. I have my golf stories, but And then the last is that we can't be afraid to say, once we've done this, once we've ended isolation, once we've changed professional development, that this is mandatory practice. And you have, and I know that's a hard pill to swallow. I wish I could go back in my career and make changes, is that you have people that are practicing what we're talking about in each of your buildings right now. They're working in isolation. They'd be embarrassed if you said, look, let me bring you out and show you to the, you know, they would. We have to end that because the practices are there in each building. You don't have to import people to do it. But you have to not be afraid, once we've done all this the correct way, to say it's not optional to teach in a way that doesn't engage students, that doesn't differentiate for them, because our kids will fail and continue to fail unless we change the way we approach this whole thing of teaching.
Thank you.
I had a question around your comment around that our teachers are isolated, and I would probably argue against that, being that we spend millions of dollars on professional development. The question that I have is that my criticism of our RTA contract is that they're not made to go. I think maybe there may be some language in the contract now that compels our teachers to be
one.
And that's not what I'm trying to do.
I know you are.
Yeah.
But now we have a system, even under APPR, to say who's highly effective, effective, and all that. It seems to me if we're asking teachers to differentiate their lessons for the kids that are in front of them, we should be asking our administrators to differentiate their professional development for the staff that's in front of them.
Well, I'm not only talking about teachers, I'm also talking about everybody that's involved.
Everybody, and the big piece is...
Because the teachers are the biggest
well, it's your biggest expenditure, it's your most people and all that, but everybody plays a part in this. And typically when you get to this point, boards, just the boards that I serve, want to know who's at fault. And I can tell you, it's not the way. What happens is everybody looks at someone else. And
well, let me just interject if I may.
Yep.
And I'm sorry.
Sure.
I'm not trying to find out what fault. What I'm trying to do is find out the processes of where our processes break down.
Right.
That's what I'm really interested in doing.
Well, let me give you an example about the coaches. What we found when we watched the coaches is they were coaching the willing. Some people love being coached and get better and all that. But all 3,000 teachers weren't being coached. And all 3,000 teachers weren't being coached 180 days. So again, it's the quality of implementation and the quality of the coaches and the receptiveness. And again, we have some people that say, leave me alone. And what I'm saying to you is that shouldn't be an option. But by the same token, the professional development, the quality of professional development can't be just telling somebody, well, go differentiate your lessons. Because people think they know how to do it, or maybe they don't, or they're too afraid to admit they don't. So they have to be coached through every single step. So I would say the big answer is it's got to be individualized for every teacher. Not that you're not spending a lot of money, but each principal has to individualize their professional development for the staff that's in front of them. And guess what? That staff stays there longer than probably the kids do. So there's no reason. These don't have to be one-year plans or two-year plans. That staff is going to be with you. That principal is going to be with you.
And I think central office plays a role in this in terms of making sure that, I mean, if you work in central office, I think that people say, oh, you come into a cushy job. Folks that work in central office, they need to, because it's not the boardroom's jobs. We got their job to make real money during the day. We need to monitor it better, maybe. But the folks that work in central office that are supposed to be overseeing this, the zone chiefs, deputy superintendent for teaching and learning, needs to be out there on the ground making sure that principals are doing these things. Because I think that most people won't.
Universities are not preparing our teachers in the way in which they should be prepared. Can you comment on that?
You know, I can, and I'll ask this a lot. I'm one that doesn't blame the universities, because I think it's like blaming the mother about going to lessons about how to raise a kid and then comes home and the kid's at home. I think teaching is something that is learned on the job as you go around. Yes, they could do better with inquiry, differentiation, but it's all theoretical. What we have to change inside that building is, and not in the first 3 years when they get tenure, an extended period of time where they're coached throughout their career. And we're not built for that yet. We have to establish an atmosphere. The state's not really helping us, although the APPR has the potential, if you really stick to the Danielson rubric and it's an accurate reflection of how people teach, and we take this veil of we're going to shoot first and all that, but that you're on a career path that you have to be an expert in the urban cities to teach our kids. And there are examples around, and what I think we've been afraid to say is, you've got to be like the best in our building because our kids need it. And we spend too much time trying to chase down the real low performers and maybe celebrate the high. But the middle...
rather than the APPR calculation is not available.
Yeah, and I hesitantly admit, Bill and I were both on the APPR thing for the state. We fought that.
People get together. We should have principles that just tell people, hey, come on, get together. Talk and laugh and joke. That's what we do as a board. I tell you, this board has become more effective not because we followed some rubric, but because we have relationships. And if people are pushing anything other than that, we will continue to fail. And when I say relationships, I'm not just talking about amongst teachers. I'm talking about parents. That's what we're really struggling. To keep it real, we have parents that are not engaged with their schools and some not with their kids. And to the extent we're so preoccupied with this, I think we miss some of the real issues. So I just think, you know, you said put the stuff in context. I think another important contextual framework is we